We're ready to go.
Very good. Then it's 9 a.m. and I would like to call to order the teleconference meeting of the Finance-Auditing Committee for Thursday, November 20th, 2020. Before we begin, please note this meeting is being recorded, and Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Good morning again, everyone. Director Cochran.
Here.
Present. Director Grosboll.
Here.
Present. Director Moylan.
Here.
Present. Director Yee. Absent. Vice Chair Frederick.
Here.
Present. Chair Sobel.
Here.
Present. And President Parr.
Present.
Present. Thank you. You are actually a committee of the whole. We also have Directors Garbarino, Hernandez, Hill, Maston, Rabbit, and Terrio on the line. So you have 12 members on the line. I'm going to confirm staff now. And Dennis Mulligan.
Good morning, everybody.
Thank you. Joe Wire.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. Ava Bauer-Furbish.
Present.
Thank you. Kim Manolius, are you on the line?
Yes, good morning.
Thank you. Steve Miller.
Present, good morning.
Thank you. Mona Babauta.
Present.
Present. Jim Swindler.
Present.
Present. And Kelly Hopper.
Present.
Thank you, Kelly. That confirms staff on the line.
Thank you, Amaret. I would like to remind everyone to mute their phones until after staff's presentations, and remember to unmute when we open up for director discussion. If there are questions, the Secretary will call on you accordingly. After the discussion, we will ask for any public comment before moving on. The pages of the meeting packet are numbered on the bottom right-hand corner. Madam Secretary, would you please introduce the first item?
Thank you, Chair Sobel. Item number 3 is ratification of previous actions by the Auditor Controller, and the packet of commitments, ratification, and investment is before you and begins on page 3. Unfortunately, Leslie Murphy is not on the line today to provide her report, and in her absence, Joe Wire is actually on the line, and he's going to present the PFM report. Joe, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Amaret, and welcome to the Finance and Operating Committee. Looking at the Leslie's report, I'm going to do an abridged version. If you could,
but just as cheery though. You know, you got to have to be really upbeat, Joe.
Yes, that is a tall order.
Yes.
Thank you. If you could all turn to page 11 in yours, it's the bottom right-hand corner, the large black numbers in the bottom right-hand corner. Also, that's page 1 of page 2, actually, of PFM's report. So if you could turn down to page 11. And I will go through a little bit of the data that we're seeing right now. Okay, this one is, as we've all discussed repeatedly, the most important part for the district of most part issue of for the district right now is what's happening with the COVID-19, and that is affecting both from the investment perspective. It's affecting the marketplace. It's of course also affecting the district's finances, which we have talked and we will talk more about this board meeting. So this page basically says, you know, at the time of this writing, 43% out of the 50 states were, you know, had a 10% increase over the last week. And that was sort of the downside. On the positive side, there are now 2 different manufacturers who say that their vaccine effectiveness rate is up to 95% rather than 90%. So bad news in the short term. It looks like we hope much better news in the long term. I think what I'm reading is next spring to summer, when we would have those to a large degree, initial doses in January, February. If you look at the chart that's on the page, the graph there is, that's sort of the most eye-opener. As you can see, when you look from left to right, what we thought was bad in March was bad. And then what we thought was worse in summer was worse, and now we're looking at even worse. Obviously, these are just the case rates rather than the hospitalization rates, and the hospitalization rates tend to be the key factor. for health of our citizens. However, for health of the district, it's the case rate. If the case rates stay up this high, it's very unlikely, as we have seen, to see any further advancement in getting commuters back to work. And as we've seen actually retrenchment in the last week due to the high case load. And retrenchment means lower patronage on the bus and the ferry, and most importantly for finances, on the bridge. And that's what we're likely to see going forward. So this is not good news, as we all know. Turning to the next page, the impact COVID has is, of course, on the economy, and that affects us directly. It's always been the biggest source of loss of business for the district has been changes in the economy, either up or down. The first thing we have on the next page is the unemployment rate. Good news that it's not what it used to be. That's less than 7%. Bad news is that's actually what a recession usually looks like. The one we saw earlier was appallingly different. This 7% is something similar to what we've seen, in the recession, the dot-com bust. And if you remember 20 years ago, the dot-com bust was tough for the district. It was very difficult. And that's what we're seeing right now. The bottom chart says we're still 10 million jobs short in the national economy, and that's a very large number, unfortunately, for us. What the impact it's having on the economy is the next page. And here we have some, again, good news, bad news. The bad news is we have that huge fall in the second quarter, but then we've now had a large increase, a very large increase, larger than what many expected. So that's great, but we're still down about $500 billion, so $500 billion, which is an enormous number, and down about 3.5%, which would be a recession. So we're not in the dire straits that we were, but we're still in even if it wasn't for COVID and this was just a typical recession, I and you would be having conversations here at the Finance Committee about how we're going to reduce our expenses, because our revenues would be down. They would not be down anything like they are today, but they would still be down, and we'd still be working on this problem. Something we hadn't have had to do for the last 12 years. So it would still be a big issue for us. Overall, as Leslie likes to say, your portfolio is invested very diversely, and you can see that later in the report, and safely, as PFM has continued that process. It's earning about just under 1.5%, which is actually very good in this marketplace, where earning a tenth or 2% would be very good in any new investment. So that's going well. And so with that, I'd wrap up. And if you have any questions on part I covered or what I didn't cover, I'd happy to answer them.
Thank you, Joe. Let's go to the committee then and see if there are any questions or comments.
I have a comment.
Yes, please.
John Boylan.
Yes.
You folks remember, now we're all in this together, right? All entities are in this together. Anybody that uses the bridge, which is buses, ferries, everything. We're all in this together, right?
Right.
Right. Except the pedestrians and the bikes. Now, a couple of years ago, we brought this up, and we got kicked. I almost lost my job on account of it. But anyway, I don't care anymore, because it needs to be said. We have people coming here every year, 10 million people, to say, that visit the bridge. And of course, naturally, it's down now because of the coronavirus situation, but it will improve in the future. Now, I believe, and I think we would get help from the labor unions now to repeal that legislation that Phil Tang and Levine brought before the legislator and got it passed up there. That wouldn't be no more. They could never, in the history of the rest of our lives, that we could never raise the rent, raise the fee for pedestrians or bikes or whatever. I think that needs to be changed. And I think it could be done right now because we would help the labor unions to help with this. But they're the ones that get really screwed. Last week we voted and to layoffs and so forth. And I don't believe that's right. I've been thinking about it ever since, and I think it's not right. The pedestrians and the bikes should pay, and we're not asking them to pay every day. What we're asking them is they pay once a year. The ones that live in the area, in the six county area, they pay once a year. They can't. People that come here from out of town, of course, they pay, and then they leave, and but they have to pay when they come back again. But anyway,
yeah.
I feel that this thing could be worked on, and we have to get our lobbyists in Sacramento to work and get this thing repealed up there. Now is the time to do it, I believe.
Well, John, you make a point that I've talked about for years. Obviously, is that we've got 10 million visitors a year to the bridge. If you charged every one of them, $1, look at the revenue that would raise. If you if you said everybody in the Bay Area, just show an ID that you live in the Bay Area, or if you're on a bike, we exempt you. But there's money out there, and of course it's been shut down. I've talked about it for years, but it was shut down finally by Ting and Levine. And maybe it's time to go back and say, hey, we need to take another look at this prohibition. Maybe at the very least lift it for a while. So something for staff to think about.
If I may, this is Dennis. If I may provide some context, the legislation that placed a prohibition on a sidewalk toll on the Golden Gate Bridge, when it was originally drafted, did not have a sunset. The board took a formal action to oppose it unless it was amended with a sunset. And the authors spoke with the then governor's staff, and it was amended before it passed. So that piece of legislation sunsets at the end of this calendar year. That's just factual information for the board to be aware of. The authors did contact me about a year ago, Assemblymember Ting, to let me know that he was interested in reintroducing it. And so, I think there's a lot of bills that people plan on reintroducing, and then COVID hit. But we should anticipate that there will be a bill introduced in the next legislative session to extend the prohibition. And I just wanted to share that with the board.
No, thank you, Dennis. We'll have to keep an eye on that. Yes.
Brian, I have a question. I'm just curious. I was at a meeting the other night, and they asked me about our crossings, the number of people that are walking the bridge, and I told them what I believe is that it's way down. Is that correct?
That's correct. It is. Okay. That is correct. The sidewalks are relatively empty at this juncture, and I think Director Moylan's point is that once the vaccine is widespread use and society returns to normal, that we'll have a return of sidewalk users. But near term, there's very, very few sidewalk users compared to what we would see pre-COVID.
And then the other question was, and I suspected that equivalent, is that the suicide are way down also?
Nope. Despondent people are still despondent at about the same levels we've seen over the last few years.
Right.
Mr. Chair, could I make one comment? This is Dick.
Sure, of course.
Just so it's not all pro for this fee, not that we haven't had enough controversy on this board in the last week, but, many of us in San Francisco do favor continuing to allow pedestrians to be able to walk the bridge without paying a fee. And practically speaking, that legislation passed pretty easily, as I recall, even with our opposition. So I'm not sure it is worth the district staff or whatever expending a lot of time. But also, many of us on this board are still proud of the fact that we allow pedestrians to walk freely on the bridge. And I understand the potential loss of revenue. But I didn't want the comments just to go in the minutes as if everybody agreed with the chair and John, even though I respect them immensely. So thank you.
And this is the general manager again. What Director Groswell said with respect to the legislation is correct. It did pass easily with the overwhelming majority when it did go through the legislature 5 years ago.
Yeah, and all this should be noted, and I would say that we should also take the position that we should turn over every rock for revenue. And if people say in their infinite wisdom that it doesn't really matter, bikes, pedestrians, no problem, I'm good with that. It's just that was always a revenue source that was sitting there. That pre-COVID was one thing, but in a COVID environment, that translates into jobs and that sort of thing. So the money does helps pay for could help pay for salaries and other things. So it's a dilemma. Everything's a dilemma right now, including the material that Joe presented to us. So are there other questions on Joe's presentation?
Sorry, this is Dick. I should have also included in that comment. I only mentioned pedestrians, but I also meant the bikes too. So.
Yeah, no, I noted, and so I don't even know whether it warrants another conversation given where the legislature is on it. But I think when we're looking everywhere for additional revenue, that is a spot, and we may just look at it and say that's not the spot. But anyway, it's. John's right. It's true that there is potential revenue there. So anyway, all comments noted.
Don't forget one thing, that the people who live in the 6-county area, they only pay once a year, and they get a ticket. If they want to walk the bridge every day, they can do it, or 10 times a day they can do it. But what we're getting at is the people that come in here, and the bus loads, and the buses, they come in here and they advertise the fact that they have toilet facilities at the bridge and everything else. Nobody pays anything.
Yep.
I counted 7 buses down there one day about 3 or 4 years ago. Jesus, I couldn't believe it. So I brought this thing up before, but there's definitely money to be made, and it's not going to be just $1. We're talking at least $5, $4 or $5.
Yeah. Well, we'll just keep discussing it. I think is the way to leave it for today. But so that concludes discussion on the item. But before we take a vote, is there? Go ahead.
Interrupt. This is Bert. I was hoping you would ask for one more. It would not be surprising that I would be speaking on this subject.
Of course.
First of all, we're talking about two things. We're talking about charging everybody who's a pedestrian or bicyclist. The second one is taxing only visitors. A big consideration in this is how are you going to manage it, and will the cost of management end up being a high percentage of the net revenue, as it comes in? That's certainly one question that would have to be solved. The second question is, as we move forward on climate change, whether or not we create emissions is always going to be a big question in what we do and how we do it. I would certainly be a lot more inclined to taxing poor performance relative to climate before doing it with alternatives that are absolutely climate free and require very little space proportionately to vehicles. The third thing is that if you're going to, and this is related to my first point, if you're going to say it's only visitors, what do you define as a visitor? Is it regional, or is it state, or is it just city of San Francisco? These are all big complications in this. I think we're grabbing for something, fairly small proportion to everything else versus the association with it. And I think we, as a region and a city, we should be identified as being very progressive on the climate issue, and this is something that is going to be an uphill drive to do, and I wouldn't want to waste a huge amount of time on it. That's all I have to say.
Yep, good enough, Bert. Thank you. All right, then if there's no other discussion on the item, we should go to the public line and see if anybody has any interest in talking about the financial report or anything else under this section. Madam Secretary, will you check, please?
Thank you. I'll do so right now. Hang on one second. We have no speakers on this item.
Okay, very good. Well, then, hearing none, may I have a motion to ratify the previous actions by the Auditor Controller?
So move.
Wonderful. May I have a second?
Second.
Perfect. Thank you. Madam Secretary, please do a roll call.
Thank you. I have a first from Director Cochran, and I have a second from Director Frederick, starting with Director Arnold. Absent. Director Belforte. Absent. Director Fredericks.
Yes.
Yes. Director Garbarino.
Yes.
Yes. Director Grosval.
Yes.
Yes. Director Hernandez.
Aye.
Aye. Director Hill.
Yes.
Yes. Director Maston.
Yes.
Yes. Director Moylan.
Yes.
Yes. Director Rabbit.
Aye.
Director Rabbit. Aye. Director Sears. Absent. Director Sobel.
Aye.
Aye. Director Yee. Absent. Second Vice President Cochran.
Yes.
Yes. First Vice President Tiriel.
Yes.
Yes. And President Parr.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. The motion passes 12-0.
Thank you very much. So we will move on to item 6, since there are no actions for items 4 and 5. Item 6 is to authorize the general manager to execute amendments to contract numbers 2014 B4 and 2017 B4 with Capsich Traffic Com Incorporated, USA, relating to maintenance and replacement of the toll collection system. The staff report begins on page 25, and Joe Wire will again be up to present this report. Joe, would you begin, please?
Thank you very much. The item before you is to amend 2 separate contracts, both with CAPSH, and both relating, as mentioned, to our toll collection system that is in the lanes and then a new one that would replace it. Both of the original contracts, of course, have already been passed by the board, and the item goes into some detail about when they were passed. These are just amendments to those. These 2 amendments do not involve new money to CAPSH. So they are amendments around the way the work is structured and around the time for the implementation of the project. So those contract amendments just relate to those aspects. The overall contract values remain the same. I'll talk about the amendment to the contract for implementation of the toll system, the new toll system first. That contract relates essentially to an extension of the time, and that is about it's going to be extended about 6 to 7 months into July of 2021. So that's about 7-8 months from today. And that would when they would complete the installation of the new plaza-based toll collection system. And the other change is added functionality. We've added that CAPSH has added to the contract in place for the additional time. And this functionality was needed in a plaza-based toll collection system. So it's necessary functionality. And then just going back to remember why we're doing a plaza-based system is that the gantry-based system, which we purchased from CAPSH, the gantry is taking longer to erect. So the old system has decayed, and this new plaza-based system will bridge the time from today, from July when it's implemented, until the new gantry-based system is ready. The second set of amendments is related to the maintenance contract. Short bit of history there. CAPSH took over our maintenance contract a number of years ago because our original vendor who put in the contract was no longer servicing that. So they've been maintaining and servicing a system that was not theirs. And that's been a difficult job. And they have done reasonably well, but as it has aged, that system has aged, it's become more and more difficult for them to maintain it to the accuracy level that we desire and that is in their contract. So the amendments that we've made to that particular contract, again, does not increase the funds going to CAPSH, but does require them to designate a set team to work on our system, and it requires them to work in concert with a subcontractor that the district would actually pay for, but that this subcontractor would bring its skills also to the job, and also allow the knowledge of our existing system to be shared in a larger group. And that is a benefit of the district, to have more people who would know our existing system and be able to maintain its hardware and software, especially on the software side, for hopefully just the remaining 7 months to when the new plaza-based system is implemented. The district will contribute to that added subcontractor approximately $8,000 to $12,000 a month for 6 to 7 months. So it's not a large amount, and it will be a separate arrangement that will go through the general manager's authority. And that is sort of the summary of the board item. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
All right. I'll open it up for board questions. Are there board questions? Or committee questions? I'm not hearing any. Thank you, Joe, for that report. So with that, I'll conclude discussion on the item. Madam Secretary, is there anyone from the public wishing to speak on this item?
Thank you. Give us 1 second to poll the public. We have no speakers on this item.
All righty, thank you. Hearing none, may I have a motion to authorize the general manager to execute amendments to contracts 2014 B4 and 2017 B4 with CAPS Traffic Com Incorporated USA?
So moved.
Wonderful. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank
you. Madam Secretary, would you call the roll, please?
Thank you. We have a first for Director Fredericks and a second from Director Cochran, starting with Director Arnold. Absent Director Belforte. Absent Director Fredericks.
Yes.
Yes. Director Garbarino.
Yes.
Yes. Director Grossbull.
Yes.
Yes. Director Hernandez.
Aye.
Aye. Director Hill.
Yes.
Yes. Director Maston.
Yes.
Yes. Director Moylan.
Yes.
Yes. Director Rabbit.
Aye.
Aye. Director Sears. Absent Director Sobel.
Aye.
Aye. Director Yee. Absent. Second Vice President Cochran.
Yes.
Yes. First Vice President Theriault.
Yes.
Yes. And President Parr.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. The motion passes 12-0.
Perfect. Then we'll move on to item 7, which is to receive the annual report of the OPEB Retirement Investment Trust Board. The staff report begins on page 29, and Joe Wire will present the report. Joe, please proceed. Thank you.
Again, thank you. Again, thank you very much. This is the yearly report from the OPEB Trust Board, and it covers essentially 4 items, and I will just touch on each of those items. The first one, the report is a requirement of that the Golden Gate Bridge District Board made of the OPEB Trust Board in order to report back these important points every year. So here they are. The first point is on the investment policy, whether or not the trust is in compliance with investment policy, and it is, and that chart is attached that shows it's in compliance with investment policy. The second point is for the trust board to comment to the district board on how the contractors, the service team, is working with the trust board, and the trust says that they have done a very good job, and the performance for the investment advisor has done after fees has done better than the statewide fund run by CalPERS, and also better than a majority of its peer groups. So that's done very well, and the U.S. Bank has functioned as a custodian. The third piece was to comment on the charter, and the trust board sees no need to make any changes to the charter. And then lastly, the trust has grown to $100 million now, and we, the staff, were advised that at that level that we should look to increasing the fiduciary insurance for the trust board. And so we have done that, increase it from $2 to $5 million, and that was for the price of $6,000. And you will see that again on the renewal when it comes to the Golden Gate Bridge District Board in June. And if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you, Joe. Yes, the one thing I would observe before I open it to questions is that PFM continues to perform at a very high level, absolutely responsive to everything we need, and so I concur that they have done a great job in their performance relative to other investment groups, and doing the same work is very, very good. So thank you, Joe, for that presentation. Are there any questions from board members? I'm not hearing any, so I'll conclude discussion on the item. Is there anyone from the public wishing to speak on this?
Thank you. We'll pull the public line really quickly.
All righty.
We have no speakers on this item.
Perfect. Well, then, hearing none, may I have a motion to receive the annual report of the OPEB Retirement Investment Trust Board?
Also move.
Wonderful. May I have a second?
Second.
Great. Madam Secretary, would you please do a roll call vote?
Thank you. We have a first for Director Cochran and a second for Director Frederick, starting for Director Arnold. Absent Director Belforte. Absent Director Frederick.
Yes.
Yes. Director Garbarino.
Yes.
Yes. Director Grosville.
Yes.
Yes. Director Hernandez.
Aye.
Aye. Director Hill.
Yes.
Yes. Director Maston.
Yes.
Yes. Director Moylan.
Yes.
Yes. Director Rabbit.
Aye.
Aye. Director Sears. Absent Director Sobel.
Aye.
Aye. Director Yee. Absent Second Vice President Cochran.
Yes.
Yes. First Vice President Terrio.
Yes.
Yes. And President Parr.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you, everyone. Motion passes 12-0.
Great. I like all these unanimous votes. Next on the agenda is item number 8, status report on the fiscal year 2020-2021 budget. The staff report for 8, 9, 10A, and 10B was sent to directors and posted online on Tuesday. Item number 8 is numbered as page 35 if you're following along. Joe, would you give us your overview, please?
Thank you very much. If I could, first I'd like to say that with the reason you got these on Tuesday was that the meetings, as you know, being on the 19th of the month is very close to what we call the financial close. So we closed our books on Monday and got these reports out on Tuesday. So we thank the District Secretary's office for getting them out to you. If you could turn down to page 37, which is just two pages further, the table we've been using each month to talk about the status of where we are working on our deficit that's primarily caused, obviously, by the COVID that we discussed earlier and the loss of traffic on our bridge, bus, and ferry system. The report remains essentially the same until you go down toward the bottom. If you look at line 10, all the way over to the right, you can see that's about $48 million, which is the number we've been talking about for the last couple of months, that's about the remaining deficit that we've been working on. This report incorporates in the passage of the layoff and other items that were discussed at your last board meeting on November 13th to give you an idea of how they impact the bottom line. So line 11 is the value of the layoff for 6 months. It's the number you see in the middle column is a little different than the one in the report, a little bit smaller. There's 3 reasons why that is. The first is that report represented 7 months, and as you know, it was amended to 6. The layoff was going to begin in January. And then also that report included 205 positions, 59 of them vacant. Those vacant positions have actually already been included in savings on this table for months, because they were vacant and we assumed that we would keep them vacant. Some of those were in the ferry system. For example, the positions that would operated the baseball service or other things that we were not using anymore. And others were in the item way up on the top of the page, item 2, line 2, which talks about just vacancies the district had and it did not plan to fill. So therefore, that's why you see an $11 million 6-month figure in the middle column, that instead of the close to 15 that was in your board packet. Looking at line 13, that's the value of the severance package that was passed by the board, and that is, as I said, is an additional expense. And then the 13 and 14 represent the furlough savings that came from management that were also passed on the last day, on Thursday, on Friday the 13th. So now you can see the figure in the bottom right-hand corner is about $37 million. That's our target. We will be working, obviously, as staff and with you, with the board, in the coming months of the fiscal year, looking at more we can do in our attempt to balance this budget as well as we can. If there are any questions with this report, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you, Joe. And I want to say that to you, to your staff, to everybody at the district, I know that you've been working very, very hard to both develop these numbers and present the numbers. The situation is so regrettable and devastating to the district, but I appreciate all the hard work, Joe, by you and your staff to present an accurate picture. So with that, are there questions on this item?
Mr. Chair, I did have one question.
Yes, please.
Joe, has there been any analysis of potential savings with respect to, and also just fearing any future adverse action, retirement incentive programs, such as what I think BART is proposing for some of its employees? Has any type of analysis has been done on that as far as dealing with the future employment issues?
Yes, we have looked at it, and we encountered several, really important issues. The first was that, and for the long term, we have always looked at this reduction in the number of passengers on the bridge, bus, and ferry system as a temporary issue. Of course, in the beginning, we thought it would be less. I don't say that less temporary. No, we thought it'd be more temporary. In other words, only a few months, maybe 6 months. Well, now we all know it's going to be longer than that. We still don't know how much. So, so to incentivize retirement was at the time an expensive way of getting at something we hoped to avoid, which was not having layoffs at all. Obviously, we've now encountered that situation. Even when we were looking at the layoff situation, the incentives for retirement, again, fell into that same bucket. We assumed that we're going to bring these, we assumed we were going to bring those folks that were laid off back to the district. So we weren't looking to incentivize their long-term retirement. Lastly, we looked at those incentive programs, the ones the district had in the past, and they added to the expenditures that we were going to incur, the district was going to incur, and that at the time did not look like a long-term gain for the district. As you can see, the district still has a shortfall. I wouldn't want to say anything is off the table to be looked at. So that issue could be brought up again as we go forward, especially if it is believed sometime in the future that some of these situations are permanent and or at least very long term. That could be looked at. That idea could be looked at differently.
Yeah, I wasn't promoting it necessarily. I'm not even sure what my position would be. I was partly just curious if any analysis had been, and of course, if it's retirement incentive versus a layoff, a retirement incentive might be better. But anyway, it might be worth a discussion. But I sort of want to think about it myself. I was just curious whether any analysis had been done. So, thank you.
Hello.
Hello, Director Sobel. There we go.
Yeah, what's going? Did we lose Joe, or was that?
No, you're fine now. No, was a little bit bad.
Did you hear my comments, Dick? Yeah.
No.
Oh, what I said after Joe's comments simply were I'm not sure what my position is on that. I just was curious whether any analysis had been done. But certainly one theory is that a retirement incentive where somebody gets added pension benefits is maybe better than laying off somebody else. I'm not sure of that. But mainly I'm just curious whether any analysis had been done. So,
yep.
Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. So are there other questions for Joe on this item? Madam Secretary, do we have anybody from the public that wishes to just weigh in?
Thank you. I'm going to pull the public line. Thank you. We have one speaker.
Okay.
In a second, we'll unmute and have the first speaker go ahead. All right?
Okay, very good. Yes.
Go ahead.
Ready? You can hear me?
Yes. Who is this, please?
It's David Pilpel. Nice to talk to you.
Oh, hey,
again.
David. How are you doing? Jump in.
Well, it's one of those days. So I have a number of thoughts. Let me try to be concise. The board took a difficult but decisive action last Friday to reduce district expenses and lay off staff. I think it would be helpful to have a summary in narrative form, perhaps in a memo, of the district-wide impact on programs and services. I understand that the impacts are not just a reduction of bus service and ferry schedules, but has impacts in the bridge division and the district division. And so throughout the organization, it's going to be more difficult to get work done, direct work, support work, engineering, finance, everything. And I think it would be helpful to make that part of the continuing story, that, there is, pretty significant belt tightening and freezing positions has impacts throughout the organization. I was going to ask to confirm if the report on page 37 reflects the January 4th layoff date, but I understand from Joe's description just now that it does. And so that still has a $37 million deficit for the current fiscal year, which is, significant. Hopefully the district will consider the suggestions that I offered in my letter from last week, dated November 12th. I did put a lot of time into that, and I hope it's looked at. I would consider a possible toll increase before June 30th, especially if there's no additional federal bailout. Otherwise, you do spend down the reserves, and then there's no reserve, or less reserve in the future. There will certainly continue to be uncertainties, and I just wouldn't rule out a toll increase, and I would think about setting a public hearing just to take the temperature of the public on that at some point in the new year. I thought that on related topics, I thought that last night's Bus Passengers Advisory Committee, BPAC, was useful and productive. Wanted to call that out since there was no Transportation Committee meeting today. Hopefully tonight's San Rafael Transit Center project community meeting will also be illuminating. I wanted to call attention to tomorrow's MTC meeting and just touch on the controversy about Plan Bay Area strategy EN7. That's the telecommute mandate, which on the one hand suggests that people would continue to work from home for an extended period of time, and that has positive implications for air quality and greenhouse gas reduction, but it has significant negative consequences for the future of our transit systems, and to some extent, or to a great extent, business tax revenues in places like San Francisco. I'm sure we'll be hearing more about that, but that has, again, pretty significant implications for the transit system going forward. And I just conclude by saying that if we don't thoughtfully restore elements of the transit system going forward, then there won't be much of a system or any real transit system left. I understand and I support what staff has done to tailor the transit system capacity to demand, including the changes set for December 13th. But there really isn't much of a system left with the December 13th changes. It's extremely bare bones. And I just wanted to call attention to that. Thanks for taking the time to hear me. I appreciate you all very much.
Thank you, David. Thank you for your considered comments. Much appreciated. No action is required for this item. So moving on to item 9, we have the monthly review of Golden Gate Bridge traffic tolls and bus and ferry transit patronage fares /fares. The staff report is numbered as 43, and Mr. Wire will present the item, as well as 10A, monthly statement of revenue and expenses, which begins on page 51, and 10B, the monthly statement of capital programs and expenditures, which begins on page 61. Joe, would you give us your comments on those?
Thank you very much. And again, given our situation here with the large changes we have seen with COVID, we will continue to comment just slightly on each of these each month. If you turn to page 45, that's the landscape table of data. Gives you the bridge, bus, and ferry ridership and revenue numbers. Ridership on the right, revenue on the ridership is on the left, and revenue on the right. If we start at the top right-hand box, that's bridge revenue. It is slightly increasing, but only slightly. And unfortunately, this is through October. Unfortunately, November has not continued that increase, as is actually given a little bit back in November. Unfortunately, it's still averaging under 70% of where we would be on a normal year. So that's obviously not conducive to having the subsidy to provide to our bus and ferry system. The bus and ferry system itself, on the next two sets of boxes, in the middle and the bottom. On the left-hand side, you can see bus, bottom part of that box, you can see bus ridership is still down approximately 80%, 79% exactly. And so that means we're getting about 21% of the riders we normally get in our streamlined system. And that the revenue is about 17% of what we normally would bring in. That's on the on the right. And then if you go to the very bottom set of boxes, that represents ferry. Ferry is still averaging about 3% of its riders, 3 to 4% of its riders, and about 3% of its revenue through the year. It has gotten slightly better, as we mentioned the last month, but it's still extremely low for what we've had before. And with that, bus and ferry alone, we've lost about $12 million in fare revenue through the first 4 months. If you could turn to, if there's any questions on that, otherwise I'll keep going.
Questions?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I have a question. This is Director Terrio.
Go ahead.
Joe, we had testimony from one driver last Friday that because of the limitation on the capacity of the buses made necessary by COVID and social distancing, he was having to leave some potential passengers at bus stops that pass them by. That's in the realm of anecdote. Do we have any way, and have we been tracking that so we have an evidentiary response to that?
Yes, this is Dennis, the General Manager. We track it daily on all the routes that we operate for ourselves and Marin Transit. The routes we operate on Marin Transit have a much more significant challenge than the Bridge District, and we've adjusted service. So in July, Marin Transit had a couple thousand pass-ups. We had 500 pass-ups. A pass-up is an individual at a bus stop. We've added extra service on our basic routes, which is the 101 corridor, and on the Route 40 that crosses the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge to avoid that from happening. The service that we've cut is the commute service that leaves Mill Valley or Ross Valley or some of the neighborhoods that goes into San Francisco where we have no riders. But on the basic service, we have some riders, and we have added service there, even though we've cut the overall amount of service to avoid that, and it's data that we track every day.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Joe, any other comments?
No, I've not. If there are no further questions, and I would direct your attention to page 51, which is item 10A.
Yep.
And if we could look at the middle of the page of item, so that's page 51, item 10A, middle of the page, and that just summarizes the financial data, which is incorporated in the rest of item 10A, as operating finances. I think there's one thing of note to point out that this month we recorded the last amount of CARES Act funding. So it shows up in the revenue column under federal. And it's why that when you look at the middle of page 51, you can see that the current year actual revenue of $55 million is larger than the expected budget of $51 million. We're still almost $30 million below where we were last year, but that actual set was about $7.7 million in CARES revenue. That was, of course, not budgeted because at the time we made our budget, we didn't know we'd be receiving these revenues. But it didn't make it look like we had a very significant increase in revenue. As you know, we've been counting on this CARES revenue the entire time. In fact, as you saw on item 8 of what we call the waterfall table, of course, it shows up at the very top as a way of, one of the first things, the way of reducing the deficit is putting in the CARES Act money. So it's not new revenue per se, but it showed up for the first time. So I just wanted to draw your attention to that. And the second set of numbers in the middle of the page, that's the expenses. The expenses continue. The work of staff and the board to keep expenses down has continued. It's about $6 million less than last year, almost $17 million less than the budget. And that is further down than it was last month. So the trend has continued. And it's not surprising because that has been actively worked on by everybody. And then looking at the revenue over expense number, of course, the deficit looks a little bit better because of the new revenue coming in. That's the $9.8 million. However, the rate of spending above revenue has continued almost exactly the same. The month of October is pretty much the same as the first 3 months. It's about a little over $1 million a week over. So our expenses are about $1 million over our revenues each week, and that has continued through October. And then if you want either the consolidated or division level information by line item, that's in the following reports. Otherwise, I would stop here if you have any questions.
Okay. So any questions from the board committee members on Joe's presentation? Okay. Well, thank you, Joe. So no actions are required for items 9, 10A, and 10B. So at this time, we will move on to item 11 on the agenda, which is the closed session. Before we do that, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. And by the way, maybe I ought to loop back and make sure, Madam Secretary, that nobody from the public has any comments.
Thank you. Let me do one last brief on that.
Yep, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
We have one speaker, so in a second we will unmute that speaker.
Okay.
Go ahead, Justine.
Go ahead, David.
David.
Who is this? Okay, David.
David Philpell again.
A couple minutes this time, though. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I didn't really need to say anything. Doesn't even need to be in the minutes. I just wanted to thank everybody for your good work and talk to you perhaps tomorrow. Take care.
Perfect. Thank you, David, very, very much. All right. No other speakers, then we will place the public on hold for the duration of this item and reconnect the call after the closed session discussion. Mr. Manolius, would you please take us into closed session?
Of course. Thanks very much. At this time, the Finance-Auditing Committee will meet in closed session for a conference with legal counsel regarding existing litigation under Government Code Section 54956.9A, specifically with regard to a case called Hayes versus Golden Gate Bridge District.
All right, give us 1 second. All right, we're in closed session. Let me start the recording again. Okay, we're back in open session.
Wonderful. Attorney Manolius, any comments you would like to make about closed session?
Yes, thank you, Chair Sobel. The committee met in closed session and gave appropriate, on the item listed on the agenda, and gave the negotiator appropriate guidance as to how to proceed. Thanks very much.
Wonderful. Thank you for your report. Madam Secretary, do we have any members of the public wishing to address this committee before we move to close out the meeting?
Okay, let me check one last time. We have no speakers.
Wonderful. Well, I'll thank everybody for your attention today, for the excellent staff work, for everybody involved, and that does take us to the end of today's agenda. May I have a motion to adjourn, please?
Chair Sobel, could I make a very quick comment?
Yes.
I didn't think of it to mention it at the time, but to our earlier subject regarding pedestrians and bicyclists on the bridge, I suggested this a few years ago. I'll bring it up again. I think we should look, because this is a very real cost to the bridge. I don't argue with that. That we pursue either through the legislature or separately to get funding for the cost of pedestrians and bicycles on the bridge, probably through CARB, which is certainly subsidizing things like electric cars and electric bikes and everything else, but not the fact that this is a desirable use of the bridge. It has absolutely no climate effect, and we should be able to work through the legislature to provide funding for us in providing that. Most of the state bridges, as you know, do not allow bicyclists or pedestrians on them. So I would ask that we pursue a way that we can be reimbursed for the cost, but not like tolls to individuals. Thank you.
Well, I think you make a good point. I mean, if it is, the state legislature that is, saying that we can't use that as a revenue source, maybe certainly the offsetting costs for for all the things we know that visitors bring to the bridge in terms of their needs, that may be a good alternative. Bert, good, really nice suggestion. Other thoughts
Director Maston?
Yes,
I have a comment.
Please.
Yes. To tag on to Bert's comments, I wonder if that might be something that could be written into King's reauthorization.
Right. I think it's, I know Dennis is listening, and that may be something to, that's additive to the legislation if they can add it. I think it's a good suggestion. Director.
If I may, in December, we typically come to the board with a legislative platform for the next year. So we'll draft something to include in the legislative platform responsive to what we've heard today, so that it can be discussed by the GAPI committee and then the full board at your meetings next month.
Perfect. Good suggestions. All right. Then if there are no other comments by the board members, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Not hearing any. Thank you, colleagues. That concludes the meeting of the Finance-Auditing Committee. The time is 10:02. Have a good day, everybody.
All right.
Thank
See
you
you all tomorrow.
Yep.